Well, everyone, we are just thrilled to have Brandon Carson, Vice President of Learning and Leadership at Walmart. Most of you probably know this, but Brandon has been a regular participant at Frederickson events for a very long time, starting with our summit in, was it 2019 or 18?
18, I believe.
2018. And Brandon is definitely a thought leader and learning and development. And actually, I think he is at least part of the vision behind our thought leader series. When we were thinking of thought leaders and people that we knew, could we give more of an avenue to people who were really, exploring new topics and doing things in learning and development that were more leading, and not kind of reacting. And my favorite story for Brandon, he probably won't even remember, but I picked him up at the summit and was driving him to the location. And I have no idea. My mind was racing 100 different ways, and it may have been some of the worst driving that I've done in my life. And yet Brandon still talks to me and, still feels like we're friends, and just very, very delighted to have Brandon. You'll notice in his presentation, Brandon likes having conversations. He likes making a difference through learning and development, and just can't wait to hear his thoughts today. And with that, we'll introduce our speaker, Brandon Carson.
All right. Thanks, Jay. No, I didn't know that about the car. I'm the worst driver, though, so you can't be worse than myself. Good morning, everyone. I want to let you know I'm not in a prison. This is actually what we call the home office at Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas. I joined Walmart last June from Atlanta, actually. So I was a virtual new hire, which was interesting. We were, as we were coming out of the lockdowns, but moved to Bentonville last October. So literally a year ago today, we were loading up the moving trucks from Atlanta and coming here. And it's been a heck of a year. So I have some things to share with you. One of the interesting things that a year ago, I was going through the virtual onboarding as a new hire to the company. And now my team owns the onboarding experience. And so having just gone through that, I'm lucky to get to own that experience now and keep it going forward and make the changes we want to make as we're coming back to providing in-person onboarding. So looking forward to talking to you all today. Let me share my screen here. Let me, and I would, to Jay's point, definitely like to make this as much of a conversation today as possible. I've got a lot of stuff to share, but it doesn't mean that we have to share it. We have to just go through it linearly. We can talk anytime you have questions. Before we get too deep into it, I would like to let you know that I've published a couple of books. My latest one came out last year as well. The first one I published in 2017, and that was kind of, Jay, that was what we were highlighting when I came out there in 2018, was the publication of this book. Talked a little bit about it. Both of these books were really premised on the impact the digital age was having on the workplace, the workforce, and business in general. And then of course I started writing this second one, L&D's Playbook for the Digital Age, in 2020. And right as the pandemic unfolded, the ATD press person was calling me going, okay, you got to get stuff in there about what's happening. And I'm like, we have no idea what's happening here, the impact of this as it was unfolding. So, but there is some stuff in there about predictions around it. So you can check it out and see if I was right on some of my predictions. But I really look forward to sharing a bit about the reason I wrote the book. And that's kind of my being in this practice for 25 years, it's kind of my perspective that we need to make some changes. And first, those were predicated on just what's happening with the work as it's evolving through the digital age. But then the last 2 years has really kind of reset and made us rethink and reconfigure a lot. So I'll walk through some of that. But But then I also want to talk about really going to keep it on the next 5 years. And these are the three kind of key areas I want to talk about for the next 5 years for our practice. How the workplace is getting even more complex, how business is accelerating exponentially, requiring us to consider a new playbook for what we do. Then I'll segue into explaining some things we're doing at Walmart to meet this sort of urgent call, if you will, for change in our practice. I really firmly believe, thinking about the next 5 years, this is going to be more transformational for corporate learning than the last 50. We have so much heightened visibility now. I'm sure we're all feeling a little bit of that pressure, but there's definitely a more pronounced belief that the workforce is what primarily drives sustainable value creation for the organization. I actually started when the pandemic unfolded. I was at Delta Airlines in Atlanta, and I would highly recommend not to be working at an airline during a global pandemic, because it really was quite disruptive to us. 2019 being the most significant. It was actually, in recorded human history, the biggest travel year ever. I mean, more people were moving around the earth than they ever had before. And coming off of 2019 with that sort of acceleration, if you will, and people wanting to travel and connect with each other and be all over the world, then to 2020, where we had to shut it down and basically put the business to rest for most of that year, was quite a crisis to lead through. But coming sort of on the tail end, I hate to say coming out of the pandemic, we don't know if this is a once in a century pandemic, or is this a century of many pandemics? I mean, we don't know, right? We definitely didn't have a playbook for that one. So that's why I talk about the next 5 years, right? Because it's almost harder to think further out nowadays. But one thing we know, we now have a workforce with backgrounds and experiences more diverse than ever before. And we must be cognizant that the fact that people, real flesh and blood people, even if they're remote via Zoom like we are today, they're what takes our business into the future. And so these are the doers, the problem solvers, the innovators, that your workforce is leveraging technology. So one thing to remember, humans are leveraging technology. The technology itself is not what all our decisions should be made around. And this is the number one reason our practice is becoming, especially HR and L&D, when you think about it, it's becoming much more adaptive. So anyway, I would like to dig into these things today. Going to start with workplace complexity, but I've actually got some questions for you. I think, Luke, can you throw up some poll questions? You're not getting out of this presentation without doing something, folks. So we're at least going to have you answer some questions, and maybe this can spur some discussion as we go. Is your organization actively formulating future of work strategies that you know of? Okay, look at that. Wow. Can you see the live? Can everyone see the live polls going? Or do we have to wait to share results?
We have to wait to share results.
Okay. Wow, everyone's answering pretty quickly. Okay, looks like most people are answered. So can we display these results?
Yep, they should be displayed for everybody right now.
Yeah, wow, check that out. That is really a positive response to that question, because one of the things we're doing here is we're completely aligned to our workforce strategy group as we're connecting to what is the future of work, right? And so I was in a talent review with our chief operating officer couple months back, and we were just doing rounds of introductions of what we do. And after I introduced myself, he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing to prepare us for the 2030 Walmart?" Which is only 8 years away, I might add, right? And I looked at him, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm just trying to get through my day right now. But if we want to talk about what is the future of the company, what are the capabilities our leaders need in 2030? Versus what they have now. And that's sort of looking at those mega trends, right? Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. So 71% of you are connected to future of work strategies at your organization. That's fantastic. Any comments or questions about that? Just throw them in the chat. We'll talk as we go. All right. We have, what's the other, we have another question, right, Jay? Let's throw that up. Has your company increased investment in training since the pandemic? I really need to know the answer to this so I can change my diatribe on the fly here, which I'm about to go into. Okay, look at this. Oh, I just got a note that my internet connection is unstable. So let me know, Jay, if I start getting warbly.
So far, so good, Brandon.
Okay, great. Okay, this one's shaping up to be just as interesting as well. I like watching it real time. Yeah, Kate, that's really good. Aligning with future work strategies has helped us with our technology within the L&D team. That's a key component. Okay, looks like we've got almost everyone answered. So let's share these results. Pretty good distribution, right? So you have seen some investment coming through. Most of you have seen some increased investment coming through. Fantastic. All right, let's jump in. So when I talk about how the world is changing in profound ways, I think we can close that poll. Let me get that out of the way. I'm not just talking about the technology tsunami of the last 2 decades, right? So I often go and talk about like our world is changing. We're coming out of this pandemic. We're into this probably the roaring 20s, right? But a lot of us talk about this technology tsunami of the last 20 years, but that's really not the only way the world is really changing. There are fundamental shifts occurring that are redefining how humanity views the world and their place in it. I mean, I think that became very apparent over the last couple of years. But what's coming out of that too is what we expect both from work, the work we do, in the lives we live. So this crisis we've been through brought that sort of hopefully once in a century moment of recalibration. And I like to call this moving from the VUCA world, which was that volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous state that we used quite a bit, which the military started describing years ago about the state of our world, to now what's being called a BANI world: brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. And this was created by James Cassio. If you Google him, there's some really fantastic stuff that he's come up with. But he says we're now in this brittle world where many of our once solid systems are on the verge of collapsing under the weight of innovation and change. I mean, there's not a day we're not going by where it seems like some kind of change or some kind of innovation is occurring. And anxiety, this is where every choice matters. This is a pandemic of mental issues triggered by anxiety that we're dealing with in lots of different ways, which is new for a lot of us in HR and L&D, to deal with well-being and safety and health and mental health in the workplace. And then non-linear, like cause and effect, are no longer connected. Small decisions can have real significant and consequential impact. And so a lot of leaders get very cautious about some of the decisions they're making. And then incomprehensible. We have such easy access to fire hoses of information. We've seen over the last several years misinformation and disinformation really coming at us as if it's being sprayed from so many different places, right? And can actually cause a lot of distrust and wariness. And so I don't want to, I'm going to be as positive as I can today, but we really have some moments that we have to think about where we in HR and L&D really have a heightened responsibility to bring, different thinking forward, if you will, to help the workforce and the workplace through this period of time, which is, like this is saying, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. So thought I would just throw that out at you all as we move into what I'm now calling the capability crisis. So I swear this is going to end on a positive note, but we're in this capability crisis in this country. And I want to talk a little bit about the reason almost any CLO will tell you they're working on a skills strategy. It is, it's because of this misalignment in capability, and everyone's feeling it. I'm sure you are all feeling it, definitely feeling it here. But it's really driven by the skills shortage that we're faced with. So not only are job requirements mismatched to the workforce's capabilities, but there are also not enough skilled workers available to us. At Walmart, we're focusing pretty assertively right now on becoming a skills-based organization. We're in the process of re-credentialing many of our jobs to broaden eligibility for them, regardless for folks, regardless of their degrees. We get 11 million job applications every day at Walmart. We have 53,000 jobs defined in our job architecture. So it's quite a big deal to think about that transformation, or that transition to a skills-based organization. But if you look at these numbers, it's pretty stark. 74% of the new jobs created between 2008 and 2017 required a college degree. 60% of Americans don't have a college degree. And so that's saying that 60% of the workforce has access to only 26% of the new jobs. And so therein tells you the mismatch. And you've seen pretty assertively over the last couple of years, especially starting with tech companies, they've started to reduce that requirement of a credential like a college degree for the workforce. But we need time to transition the workforce to the capabilities that we need them to have. There's millions of people that we have to migrate to new skills that are necessary. So when you bring up necessary for them to perform optimally. So when you bring up the confluence of the pandemic, employee expectations that have changed over the last couple of years of what they want from work and what they expect in the workplace, this is disrupting all of the, or several of the work processes and changing the economy of the work itself. And this is creating a new digital labor economy. And I think that disruption is cutting across every industry that you can see. I mean, there's no industry not impacted by this.
We have a question for you, Brandon. Anita asks,
yeah, let's hear it.
For professionals just coming into the workplace, does this model apply? Do they feel the fire hose, or do they just expect it to be that way?
Well, I can talk from the experience of my team. So one of the things I'm doing with owning onboarding, so I let you guys know that my team now has onboarding. We have corporate and officer onboarding. So we do provide a different experience for our officer level new hires and promotions than we do for our corporate and our field. So I don't own field onboarding. That's still owned by the business. But when folks coming in, so the average officer tenure here is 3 years. And a lot of the feedback we're getting is because of that span of control, that scope, which can be pretty big here, and that sort of fire hose of information. So I think you're right, Anita. People aren't necessarily not expecting the work to be complex and the scope to be big, especially coming into an organization like this. However, mitigating that fire hose of information and helping people understand prioritization is critical. And that's where our leaders we're reformatting our leaders to become more talent developers, if you will, and to really help with that just relentless and assertive fire hose. Like I was told in my new hire, and this is probably not news for any of you in your organizations, I was told in my new hire that you have to set up the guardrails around the work itself because it will consume you. And so a lot of what we're doing through our health and wellness pillar in the global people operation is really helping to define the criticality of balance, and making sure that we are helping to provide that for people going forward. So kind of building on this capability crisis a bit, we're talking about it here pretty assertively as well, this idea of reskilling and upskilling. And reskilling has multiple dimensions, and the breadth and depth of it, the need of it is astounding. Here's what I fear is happening, and this is why I want to bring this up. I feel like there's a skills polarization in the workforce that's dividing the workforce into two types of workers. There's the physical worker focused on manual labor and routine tasks, And then there's the cognitive worker focused on complex problem solving and non-routine tasks. But this skills polarization is affecting career mobility, and it's reducing the ability to reskill workers for the new types of jobs we're creating. And this schism is being formed between the two. And this is my worry about what we're able to do in the workplace. We talk a lot about accelerating skill building, accelerating capability. This significant gap between the types of workers is not necessarily or can't necessarily always be accelerated. And in some respects, that's just not how it works for humans to attain new capability to do new things. We know automation's chipping away at routine tasks. We know that humans are going to be augmented with technology and automation more than replaced. And so that augmentation is going to require skilling in and of itself. There's a simple example of this when I was at Delta Airlines. I don't know how many of you fly Delta or have ever flown Delta, but we have an app. I say we, I'm no longer there, but they have an app. And in that app, you're informed, you're notified when your bag is loaded onto the plane, and then when it's unloaded off the plane. A very great customer promise. The feedback's been fantastic. It makes people feel more comfortable when they're sitting in their seat on the plane and they see the notification that their bag is on the plane with them. They love that. And so that simple piece of customer promise, if you will, takes a lot of technology, and it takes a frontline worker who's loading the bag onto the plane to be able to leverage technology to scan the bag. So thousands of bags are going onto a plane every day that this person has to scan. If you miss one bag, then you've broken the customer promise. And that device required to do that has a lot of technology that's necessary for that to happen. This worker, who's a frontline worker, is going to have to be able to potentially troubleshoot or deal with that technology when things go wrong, right? So this simple fact that we can implement and integrate technology into every part of the work process is one thing we're assertively doing in the corporate space. But we have to understand that we have skills deficits that apply when we look at the workforce's capabilities to execute their job with that augmentation of technology. So we just have to understand that there is there's a process in doing that, right? And it's not that we're going to automate tons of jobs and humans won't be there. We're really finding that augmentation is where we're going to be. So let's make sure in our focus that we're understanding the schism between those two types of workforces that we may have. I mean, you may not be dealing with a frontline workforce. The last 10 years, I've dealt with both corporate and frontline workforces, and that's where I've noticed that capability schism happening. Then when you add on top of that skills deficiency we face in the corporate space, we're seeing unprecedented pressure on our core civic institution, which is public education. The fallout dramatically impacts us, right? So public schools serve 90% of our kids. And since 2020, we've had over 1 million educators who have just left the space. They've left the job. Lots of reasons why, right? Obviously the pandemic, but there's so many other factors involved. That's a 40% increase over 2020, and it's leaving a desperate shortage of teachers in this country. And then 1.5 million students have left public school altogether to find alternative ways to get educated. And yeah, you're right, Beth. I've just hired a couple of teachers into L&D here. In my nonprofit L&D Cares, we're actually mentoring and coaching a whole cohort of former public school teachers to come into L&D. Parents are concerned, yes. But the other kind of impact here is 1 in 5 Americans don't even have basic English literacy. Math scores are dropping for the first time on record. So the pandemic and the move to Zooming as school has had an impact that's going to follow us for quite some time. This is going to potentially be eventually a really big challenge for us in corporate L&D. We're getting the workforce from public school not prepared for what we might think of as basic business skills coming in. So now on top of moving your workforce assertively into deeper capability with what's happening in technology, you're also going to be faced with, if not already, you're going to be faced with needing to train to some basic skills just in business in and of itself. The demands of business are going to be relentless as we keep going forward. So I hope I'm not bumming everyone out, I hope, but this is just a stark kind of reality of where we are. Sometimes in corporate L&D, we're getting so kind of mired or buried in our day-to-day, like getting out, whatever we're doing. We have to really be thinking a little bit broader and opening the aperture a little bit wider to look at how that, we talked about, most of you are involved in future of work strategies. These future of work strategies connecting to the business outcomes that we're going to need. Back to my chief operating officer's comment, are you preparing your workforce, right? And are you even able, and I'll talk a little bit about how we're doing this at Walmart, are you even able to get more into the community as well? Because companies are going to have to start looking at, can we help educate before the workforce comes to us?
Brandon, we have
And
another
you're saying, are
question
these just for the US? Yeah, so that's really good, Robin. These stats right here are for US, not global. I would assume that coming out of COVID, I don't like making assumptions, but I would assume coming out of COVID that this is going to be more of a global problem than just a US problem. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about the acceleration going on in business, but I think we have a couple more questions to throw up, right, Luke?
Yes, we do. Here's the first.
All right, this is another opportunity to lean in. How healthy is your talent pipeline? We've got fast fingers today, Jay. This is really cool. People are voting fast.
I don't know that I've ever seen people answer the polls quite so quickly. So you're doing great, Brandon.
Yeah, this is we're all engaged. Yeah, no, this is interesting. And it's going the way I thought it might. All right. I think we have 87 of you answered. Going, poll ended. Let's share these results. Look at that. So very is 9%. Needs work 78%, weak 13%. This is about where I thought it would go. And this is also a critical component, especially for us. Like I mentioned our VP tenure challenge, right? And turnover and attrition is really a challenge, right? And so, I mean, it can cost up to almost $1 million to acquire and integrate a senior executive in our company. And if they're going to only be here for 3 years, that's a big challenge, right? So this is another component of where we have a heightened accountability and responsibility, I think, is to kind of move out of our silo and work with our broader talent management practices to figure out our pipeline issue, and even defining high potential and figuring out kind of how you integrate more mobility into your organization. Okay, great. I think we have another question, Luke. Is your business actively planning for the future of work? So it kind of connects back to, we may be thinking about the skills needed, but are we really planning for how work's going to change? Are we involved in that discussion?
So Brandon, there is a comment from our audience that.
Yeah, Tori's. I love that, Tori. Really good. I'd love to hear more on how mobility strategies address the complexities of our frontline workforces. I have some stuff to talk about on that from our education platform, which is also in my remit. Okay, so this is really positive. I mean, you all are really giving me a lot more hope about what we're thinking about as a practice. So let's share these results. So it looks like there's still some coming in. It looks like the majority of us are actively planning for the future of work, and hopefully we're in some of those conversations. So good stuff. Is your business actively planning for the future of work? Most of you, a healthy majority of you, are yes, you're doing the work, and that's good. All right, let's go forward. Talk a little bit about what's going on in business acceleration, and then Tori, great question. I'll get back to that because we're doing some interesting things with our frontline here at Walmart on mobility. So I'll talk a little bit about that when we get there. So the second area, and so these three areas: workplace complexity, business acceleration, this new playbook we need, I'm saying, for L&D. This second critical area, business acceleration, we were on this road before the pandemic, talking about that sort of in technology tsunami of the digital age. There were also factors in the digital age that are hitting us quite a bit as well, right? So, but after the effect of the pandemic, do you feel it? I mean, business is accelerating like crazy. It'll be an interesting time in the next several months, as we in the US, we're hitting this sort of inflationary period, and this idea that this may be kind of a permanent state. There's lots of forecasts of like, is this really inflation? We're definitely seeing some pressure. July of this year, we had the highest food inflation at 17% in July that we've had since 1979. So we've definitely got some interesting pressures being brought to the economy lately. But if you look at like how that hits us, right? It's like, okay, we've got assertive technology integration going on. We're accelerating exponentially in technology in general. CEOs are spending enormous amounts of money on AI technologies, for example, year over year. Customer experience is at every third paragraph or every third sentence we're being talked about, especially here, customer experience, and service and product design. Everyone and everything being connected is kind of the normal now. I mean, it took the telephone 80 years to become ubiquitous. In 40, we connected almost 2/3 of the world with the internet. The next decade will probably not see 10 years of acceleration. It'll probably see 100 years of acceleration. So things are moving pretty fast. This acceleration, I know you probably feel it, chaos and confusion across the workforce, lots of reorgs, lots of changes, lots of job architecture, rethinking, redesign. Remember Banny, don't forget that, because that's really the world we're kind of in. And then our company's ability to really succeed in this hyper dynamic business environment is really predicated on the people's capabilities, right? So we know we've got these challenges ahead of us. Just to talk a little bit about kind of the pandemic and before the pandemic, there were three big factors driving this business acceleration, this real like concentrated, quick globalization effort going on across the world. It was like that, mind-numbingly fast at how we were deciding to globalize, and we had access to markets and talent. And now, even so, with so much hybrid work and distributed work teams, the remote talent has really changed how we can look at access to talent as well. Supply chains were more efficient, increasing volume and turnaround. Of course, now, one thing we learned in the pandemic is this concentration of supply chains really did have a significant adverse impact as well, right? So it made us think, well, do we need some deglobalization? I'll be honest, I don't think globalization is something that's going to turn around and stop. The world is too interconnected and too interdependent now, but there probably will be a period of deglobalization. I mean, we're seeing Apple move some of their supply chain operations to Vietnam and Thailand out of China. The healthcare emphasis, which really caused us a lot of burden when we realized most of our pharmaceuticals were in a few supply chains in China. So getting them during lockdown was challenging, right? So we'll probably go through a period of change right there. I mean, we had 72% of all pharmaceuticals were produced in China in those supply chains, right? And we know that really impacted us. And then you look at demographics. Guess what? Birth rates are down. We're getting older. We're living longer. You're going to have an aging, not only of 5 generations in the workforce, you're going to have an aging workforce with the shelf life of skills, 2 to 3 years for some skills, the most perishable. you're going to have 6-decade careers. And so how are you continuously developing the workers who are staying and aging? There's, in the US right now, there's over 37 million senior Americans living in poverty. Candidly, that's a talent pool. We've got to really start thinking of how we broaden our mind with talent pools and dynamics. How does that impact your L&D strategy when you've got not only multiple generations, but an aging workforce along with that?
Brandon, can you go back and repeat that? You kind of cut out a little bit as you were talking about, the talent pool, and the older generation living in poverty.
Oh,
and as part of the older generation, I want to hear this part.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry about that. Sometimes I'm getting these reports that my internet's unstable. So sorry about that. No, there's 37 million senior Americans living in or near poverty right now. What I'm saying is that's a talent pool, right? And we're living longer. Many of us are going to have 6-decade careers. And so we talk about continuous development all the time, but how are you going to look at the multiple demographics that you have and the different expectations that each demographic may have as it applies to not only how they want to work, but how they get skilled and how they build the capability to do the work? So that workforce planning, workforce strategies, future of work, really critical and important for us as we age. I do prefer experienced as well. Beth, really good comment there. And then when you look at technology, right? So right now we're undergoing a sea change. I've talked about this a lot, this technology tsunami, 20 years of this accelerating technology. In June 2020, Satya Nadella said, we went through 2 years of digital transformation in 2 weeks. I mean, we all really glommed onto Zoom and virtual instruction and virtual meetings really quickly. But we are integrating technology assertively, and it's not going to stop. And so we all need to be technologists. L&D needs to be on top of that. We need to understand augmentation of technology in the work and how it impacts work. And we're never not going to need technology. Every worker at every level is going to be interacting with technology to get their job done. So that rabbit's out of the hat. We know that. And so we have to figure out where's that sweet spot of moving more assertively and quicker with technology adoption in L&D and prioritizing that as well. So kind of go on my little rant soapbox there about that stuff. But that's where we are becoming a catalyst. I'm just going to bring all these up, right, instead of bringing them on one at a time. That's where we're becoming a catalyst, we meaning L&D. We need to be willing to test new technology and leverage it. We've got to assertively move away from this one-size-fits-all training that we've been kind of stuck to for the last 20 years to a one-size-fits-one strategy. You have the technology, you have the capability to integrate that more personalized or adaptive type of training that can really help those individual learners who are all on a different capability zone, if you will. You've got that technology available to us. Can you integrate it and adopt it into your practice? Every role at every level on the L&D team must have technical acumen. Like I just said, programming, you either have it or you don't. There's not a lot of in between. You want to get the right people on your team with the right technology acumen, because every company is a technology company now. And that capability must be reflected on the learning team. You're needing to build consumer grade learning experiences now. And then honestly, we're probably creating too much training content. I mean, let's leverage AI. Let's bring technology in to curate more than we create. There's a lot of content across your enterprise. There's of our time in L&D is spent curating, and we're just sort of these content factories, right? And then we have to invest in learning tech to drive scalability. And I don't know about you all, that's probably the biggest challenge we face here at Walmart, is how we get prioritized in our global tech area with learning technology beyond just the LMS. It is like a conversation that is challenging, working with our technology partners, but it's one that we have to assertively have a perspective on and be able to speak the language of as well. In the last year, we distributed about 1 million Samsung smartphones to our frontline workforce. And on those Samsung devices, we're putting learning apps on them, as well as apps to help them do their work. We have one app that contains their schedule, contains access to resources, it contains their learning content. And so that's truly moving to that learning in the flow of work model. And we found that if we just provide the device with all of the apps on it necessary, it would really speed their proficiency. All right, let me go forward here. Think about this BANI world of work. I hope, if anything, you walk away today with another acronym, because in L&D, that's what we need, is another acronym, right? You've got BANI now. So, but L&D is central. So I'm kind of drawing that connection back. And I love the fact that the majority of you are involved in the future of work somehow, right? You're looking at it, you're working with your organization on it. But we're really central, if you think about it, to architecting the future of work. We should be connected to workforce planning and strategy, as well as HR, if you're not already connected through HR, because the work systems and the work environments are what's conducive, and it needs to change, but those are conducive, or can be conducive, to motivating workers to learn while they're working. I was with Udemy last year on this survey where 400 L&D professionals we surveyed. 30%, so it's kind of matching our numbers, I think, here. 30% of organizations have a formal future of work plan, 31% have an informal plan, and only 13% have no plan in place. This is really good news. And with this cohort today, we're doing the work, or at least we're looking at it. That's really good stuff to come out of today. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of a new playbook. And this is kind of what I lay out in the book. It's like talking about the complexity of work, the simple fact that work's not getting less complex. If anything, it's getting more complex. We have all of these challenges across our demographics and our workforce, all of these challenges with how business is accelerating. That's why I'm calling for us to rethink what we do and how our practice is organized and functions. I think, Luke, don't we have another couple of questions we can throw up?
Yes, we do.
Am I talking too fast? I hope not. Are you using data to measure the effectiveness of your learning? Here we go again with the fast fingers. We ought to make a game show out of this, Jay. These are like fast fingers. We could do like a Family Feud type of thing. Okay, good, good. I feel like people are being really honest too. I like that. All right. 74% of you answered. Come on, we got a lot more people than 74. Are we having multitaskers, Jay? We need to get our we need to get our digital stick out like our teachers had in 3rd grade. All right, let's share these results. We've got, most of you are using data. Wow, that's really great. You're using data probably to help you also make decisions, not just measuring the effectiveness, but make decisions on what you should be doing, right? Fantastic, good stuff. Do we have another question, Luke?
Yes, we have one final question.
I could throw out 100 questions, but do you feel like your L&D function, that's the people on your team, have future-proof capabilities? Meaning, are they solid in helping you align to that future of work strategy and planning and deliver the learning solutions that will have true impact? Okay, seeing some interesting lines moving. All right. This might be an area where we have some work to do, folks. Okay. We're looking at about a 60-40 split. All right. Yeah, we've got some work to do here. We've got some work to do. Good. That's one of the reasons. So this is actually validating what I'm talking about with this new playbook in a way. And so let me just go into a little bit of this, and then I'll bring up kind of all of these bullets at once. So as we begin to, I'm sorry, did we not share the results? There it is. Yeah. As we begin to formulate sort of this idea of a new operating model, right? We've got new work models happening. I mean, let's be honest. It's like the sucking sound of the last 2 years has been this return to work or this return to office, or all of this hybrid distributed teams, all of this stuff about new ways of working. Sometimes I feel like sort of Stranger Things, we're in the upside down. We're just trying to figure out, that balance that people need after this crisis, right? And it seems like the arc is bending back towards let's return to the office and go back to the way things were. That seems to be this sort of assertive and relentless work. We're not yet sure that most of the workforce outside of the front line that has to be there is going to really want to work that way. So we're faced with reorienting ourselves to accommodate new work models. And this focus on, when you really get down to it, one of these things driving this idea of we need to be back together. And I'm calling this sort of the great reconnect, right? This is kind of an opportunity for us to reconnect. And it doesn't mean it has to be physical or in person, it can be virtual as well. But this idea of how do we reconnect? Because guess what? The future of work, and you'll hear this in your workforce planning and strategic thinking about the work models of the future, is less about individuals and more about teams. And so are you skilling people? Are you building the capability within your organization for people to be able to be effective in teamwork? Because that's really, like, especially here at Walmart, you can't get anything done without a team of people, usually cross-functional. So when I say team, I don't necessarily mean the work team day-to-day that you're in. You have to go cross-functional and step out of your L&D silo a lot of times and go and get your subject matter experts or your other folks, your business stakeholders, even your external stakeholders involved. We need much more capability for that. Work environments are really going to be reconfigured. I mean, let's be honest, we haven't figured it out yet because we've got all these empty buildings and this real estate sitting there where people aren't necessarily coming back, or if they are coming back, we're looking at, and it's kind of funny watching the stage right now where people are building more of these like 60s like pods, and we're, in these collaboration rooms and stuff, because we haven't quite figured out yet the work environment that matters the most and that will be optimal for most as we evolve our work models. But one thing we do know is that that legacy manufacturing model of these cubicle farms, probably not what people want for the future. Thank goodness we can probably see the death of those cubicle farms. We know that most people learn how to do their job while doing their job. That's why I'm calling for L&D and HR to be much more involved in the reconfiguring of these work environments and the work systems. A lot of times when we say, oh, but we're already embedding in the flow of work. No, what you're really doing is you're embedding an overlay onto work systems that already exist. I'm saying HR and L&D needs to be in the discussion of how to rebuild and reconfigure the work systems and the work environments for the workforce so that we move away from what John Hagel calls that scalable efficiency model, which is really all about manufacturing and widget making, to this more scalable learning model. So we are the ones that can really help the reconfiguration people, the facilities people, whoever are designing these new work environments. And think Apple Park and Steve Jobs, right? He really wanted to design that work environment to make sure people not necessarily connected on the same work team would serendipitously bump into each other and have conversations and go to a cafe, or candidly put the restrooms located in a central place where people would come from different functions, because that's what we do as humans. We connect with each other. We talk about what we're doing. We share things. That's how we learn. And so that's really necessary for us, I think, to be involved in that. And then as the company evolves its business practice, like I just said, work's going to get more complex. We're going to have more pressure on our leaders. Are we developing our leaders to be able to be talent developers, where they're really coaching more than directing, and they're leading their teams down a path of self-actualization, self-realization, right? It's almost like we need leaders as coaches more than ever before. And these are some of the things that we are on center stage for. We can really impact these areas. So if you think about it, business and L&D, we now have a heightened, the poll came back up. We now have a heightened responsibility to increase investment in human capital. So it was interesting to see that investment in training seems to be happening. We need to be able to develop a high-performing, more inclusive workforce. We've got to forecast those future capabilities to enable that career-long learning. we've got to really look at how we make a more human-centered workforce. We need a more human-centered L&D practice too. A lot of us get caught up in the transactional activity of HR and L&D. How do we change our operating model to be really more purpose-driven? I'll just share quickly with you, I was at a recent conference in Chicago, I think it was Chicago. And I met a young gentleman named, I believe it was Carson Morris is his name. He's the learning leader at Salesforce, and little younger than me. So a generational change, which I have to admit, meeting younger generation learning leaders, I have a lot of faith that generation is really bringing the change that we need. Because Carson, the first things he talked about on stage at this conference, usually like me, the old graybeard I am, I'll talk about capability, curriculum, all of these sort of L&D terms we've all spoken about for so long. His first words were joy, happiness, safety, health, and well-being. Those are what now learning leaders are talking about a lot more than we ever were before. And so to me, that's that more human-centered, like we're responsible in some ways for making sure the humanity in the work stays there. So I'm just going to throw these questions up, and I'm going to put them all up here, because when you think about a new playbook or a new operating model, these are the questions that I just want you to have in the back of your mind. Screenshot this, or if Jay will make this presentation available to you, you've got it here. But what are the workforce skills needed now and over the next several years? Do you know what those are? Are you connected that deeply to not only the business, but how the work actually gets done? How should you allocate your resources on this capability crisis? Are you in front of that? Does your CPO or your CHRO, is he or she able to talk to your CEO about the capabilities of the workforce? The CEOs are rarely stopping to ask the CHRO or CPO, oh, before I go spend 30 billion on AI technology, do we have the capability to execute on that? Oh, if not, how quickly can you make that happen? Right? These are the conversations now in this capability crisis we need to be having. Going back to that talent pool, that pipeline question, if it's weak or not strong, that's a big challenge for us, right? How should we support the business transformation? We should be in those conversations, right? And then how should we look at our own capabilities for the future as well? Just want to leave those with you. Not a lot there, but just these are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves as we go forward. So looking at this playbook, we need increased investment in L&D. We know that as our practice moves forward, we're now being relied upon to do more and to bring more to life for our workforces. So we're in that discussion right now. We're in our yearly, what we call AOP, our annual operating planning. We're in that conversation now. We're having to think the whole year ahead for our next fiscal year and plan for one time during the year to get the budget for the whole year. So we've got to start thinking of different ways to make sure that we have funding for our emerging needs, things that will come up, but also how are we doing our long range planning? How are we looking at increasing investment in this? And as you assess the landscape of the business, how the work gets done, identifying the skills gaps, what is your strategy to get that investment in the right places? As I've said, most CEOs are putting a lot of money into technology, but they're not investing that much, on parity at least, in training their workforce. Think about the restructuring and repositioning. Do you need, which I would argue, yes, you need more direct access to the senior leaders, the C-suite, people like that, to make sure your learning strategy is deeply more integrated into the business strategy. Where are you at in the organizational structure? You need to ask yourself these questions. Can you have the impact you need to have where you are? Do you need to reposition? And then, of course, rescoping, right? If you think about that capability crisis, if you think about the future workforce, if you think about how you're acquiring the right talent, knowing that it's critical to have the best talent at every level in the organization, how do you bring that to life in your strategies? Good point, Geraldine. We're bracing for a potential recession. Does that mean investment in learning goes down? I might make an argument, no, this is the time to invest more in learning because of the recession, right? So it's like, is your learning leader, are you all connected to those strategic business points? Are you having the conversation in the right way? as we go through that. So what I'm saying is, here are some steps to take, and I really spell this out in more detail in the book, but it's like just some simple stuff to do to start with, right? Are you looking at what are your skill sets on the L&D team? Where are you now? Where do you need to be? How are you looking at your learning product design and your development strategy and its direct correlation to business outcomes? To let's see, who was it? To Geraldine's point on bracing for the inflationary times we're in, this is really a good time to get definitely connected to some of those short-term outcomes maybe you can shoot for, where training can really help significantly increase something around customer experience, around your employee experience, so that you can prepare people to drive through this really tough time we're probably coming up on. What are those focus areas for your L&D team that matter the most, right? What's your digital literacy on your team? Have you established individual development plans to get your folks to the capabilities they need? And then what are the new capabilities you need on your team? Performance consulting or learning engineering, what are you thinking about as it comes to those capabilities? And just a little fun bullet point at the bottom, classroom training still makes up half of all formal learning delivered in a corporate setting still. And believe me, as the person who owns global leadership development and onboarding in our education platform here at Walmart, I'm not against classroom training, because that is a significant amount of what we do. But where is your digital infrastructure? Where can you serve that up to meet more people across with your learning plans? And so anyway, I've kind of shared this here, that this is sort of for learning professionals. This is just the 3 areas, right? This is easy stuff. I mean, think about it. We actually have the hardest job in the enterprise, because it's up to us to correlate across functions all of these things necessary to drive human capability, right? It's arguably the hardest job in the enterprise. You need that deep business acumen. You need to speak the language of technology and understand it. And even more so in critical times such as we're in now, especially with this capability crisis, learning acumen, understand deeply the science of what we do and being able to apply the science to get to those outcomes you need. And this is sort of a little rant I go on sometimes. I feel like a lot of our practice has been diluted over the years with this lack of evidence-based learning design. And so we really need to get back to that, to be that critical capability driver to the business. We are an expert, a function, kind of like a COE, if you will. We should be a center of expertise when it comes to this. I'm going to stop and see there's some great comments coming in. Yes, really good comment on people pleaser. Yeah, I'm a people pleaser as well. It's really hard, but we need to invest in our people on the L&D team. We need to make the right hires. We need to attract the right talent in. There's an art and science to what we do, right? And so we need coverage on both those sides.
Brandon, there's a great question from Paul. He says that he thinks we need to rethink all our areas as we look to the future, and instead of trying to do more with less, we need to focus our efforts on where we can have the biggest impact with the least effort. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you, Jay, for calling that out. Love that question, Paul, that comment too. So a quick example, a colleague of mine was an interim CHRO at LinkedIn for a while, and she compiled the 13 things that she wanted to get done for the year and was meeting with the CEO to go over all of those, right? And this included her L&D practice as well, which was the majority of that. So she presented it all to him. He's like, love it. This is great. Now let's identify the 3 things you can actually get done, and let's go do those. And so the lesson there was the ambition sometimes doesn't match the capability to get things done for impact. And so I think you're right, Paul. If we start looking at where can we truly impact the business, where does the data lead us to? And we've actually, on our team here at Walmart, we've got a team of data scientists who are looking at all of these different nodes in these different data stores to correlate where we can have the biggest impact. So for our talent pipeline, we've identified it's the director level. So we need more development at that director level to be able to get them to step into the next role up in a time that makes sense. We have over 2,000 directors in this organization, and about 200 of them are what we call high potentials. So we have all these 1,800 that we need more assertive development on. So I think you're right. If you really look at the data, and if you make your organization be more data informed, then those will tell you, okay, here are the 2 or 3 things that if we focus on next year, and we have 3 big bets in our organization, and one of them is building general managers, one of them is core skills for the front line, and then one of them is leader development for all, right? For all leaders at all levels. Those are the 3 things we're going for. And I think you'll be much more focused and you'll be much more impactful. It's the old model, that old cost center model where you're funded on your head count. You want to build your head count gets together and they create content because that's what they do. And then you're just kind of this burden to the business because you've got 100 people in your head count or whatever, and you're just creating things. It's sort of a part of the idea of this new playbook is let's flip that operating model around and think differently. And Paul, you captured it great.
Hey, Brendan,
yes.
Can I jump in and sneak in a question for you?
Yeah, you can.
At our summit, which Paul was one of our leaders at, Sean from Cargill was talking about the importance of getting control of the data and using the data. And you just mentioned, you guys having data scientists there. Where at your company, or where do you see kind of the future of learning in terms of, getting access to that data and using that data? I know a couple of companies who had a data person on their learning team, and that person, was kind of moved into the business, and then the learning team didn't have the data person. So just kind of curious, where you're finding your information or how you're partnering to get it.
No, it's a great question. And what I would say is you're seeing this in some companies. It'd be great to hear from folks in the room here what they think. It's this idea of an integrated talent management system. So what we're doing at Walmart, and I know a lot of companies this is cyclical in some ways, but we've created a couple of COEs. And candidly, we need to connect them even more than we have. But these COEs are responsible for all of the acquisition and management and development of the talent. And we hold the data components as well. So we actually own the performance system, the evaluation system. We own the assessment for selection and the assessment after people are enrolled. One thing we're doing right now is every officer of the company receives a 360 assessment every 18 months. It's used for their development. We hold the development strategy as well, obviously. So getting to that more integrated talent management system is critical. And another component that sort of wraps around that is a sort of a talent marketplace model, if you will, where you've got this integrated talent management system, and that might not even be the term you'd want to use, but this sort of all of the processes that bring data forward about the talent are available to us so that we can gain more, a more informed view. It's more challenging when you just have these sort of silos of HR over here, or L&D over here, talent acquisition over there, recruiting there, and performance somewhere else, and try to bring that all together. So moving towards that integrated TM is one solve for this. We're at such a scale that it was hard to bring that all into one COE. We have 2 COEs handling all of that right now, but we're very connected. In today's world, that's necessary because the data tells you things you wouldn't think about, if you just make assumptions. Now, not everything is data driven. That's why I say data informed, because there are some more just human and anecdotal data you get just being in the workplace. But without that data, you're just throwing things out there and hoping stuff sticks and works. Just to move to a little bit of this sort of new playbook, and I won't spend too much time on this slide, but this is how we were pre-digital age. We were creating lots of content. We didn't have data in a data-informed view necessarily. We lacked some insight. A lot of times, and I've been doing this for long enough, technology was driving design decisions. I remember the whole Second Life. We're in this metaverse period now. I remember back to the Second Life days. It's like, this is back to the future, folks. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to spend a ton of money going down the metaverse stream right now from a learning perspective, because I did when we were in Second Life and it didn't return a lot of results. So I'm a little skeptical there. Small teams, a lot of us have small teams, overly ambitious. Going back to that LinkedIn example, do you have 13 things you want to get done? It's pretty ambitious. How about 2 or 3 for real impact, right? And then how are we staffing our learning organizations, right? We need more multidisciplinary teams dedicated to evidence-based learning. We really want to make sure that you have some experts on your team who can say, this is what should be done for that knowledge transfer to really change behavior. There's a lot more detail on this in the book, but I just kind of want to move forward. So based on kind of all this stuff and I know there's a lot of dense content. I do apologize. A lot of stuff here, but just ask yourself these questions as you go forward, thinking about this. Today's Thursday, right? It's like, this is a good day for you just to take a screenshot or take these questions and just think about these things as you go into your next one-on-one or whatever with your manager, right? Like, are you close enough to know how the work actually gets done? Are you close enough to the work? I mean, just honestly answer yourself. A lot of us are in the work. Are you able to mitigate redundancy? Are you able to look at the maximum efficiency across how the work gets done, but also across the team that you have? Are you organized the right way? Do you have the visibility you need, and where do you sit? Those are questions I was asking before, but these are really good questions for you to think about as you go forward. A little bit more on this John Hagel thing around scalable efficiency and learning efficiency. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with John Hagel. He worked for Deloitte's Center for the Edge. He's kind of a futurist and an out there thinker. He's got some really good ideas about the challenges we have in work and what work really is. So I'd recommend you Google him. But he talks a lot about this manufacturing model that we established in the 40s for how work actually happens. And it was really built for that scalable efficiency model where we were manufacturing the same thing over and over. And the work environment itself was designed for optimal productivity. And so work was really tightly defined and task driven. And a lot of us are stuck in that work model right now. However, we need to be thinking differently about how the work actually gets done. Back to that physical worker, cognitive worker example, right? The chasm between the two. But he's like, we need to move more towards learning efficiency and like focus on how we can learn faster at scale. What needs to change in the infrastructure and the incentives in work so that learning is really a part of working. And then how do we actually build those environments so that workers are more motivated to learn and to integrate that into how they do their job. So just throwing that out there because he's in my first book, and he's a little out there as a thinker because he's seeing this schism, if you will, between the worker types as leading us probably to some form of revolution. And in a way, you're seeing some of it happen with this rethinking of unionization, right? And rethinking of how workers on the front line are, seeking the right wages and the right experiences to move them forward, right? And then there's other people that are like, no, it's not going to be revolutionary, but we're just going to need to change how we do our work and stuff like that, and how we construct environments that are more conducive. But we don't have 20, 30 years, another generation to think about this. We really have to start doing things. So I encourage you to look him up. I'd like to kind of segue into talking about some of the things we're doing at Walmart, which is probably interesting to you, and like to share with you some of the things there that we've got going on. And again, just to tell you a little bit more about my remit. So my remit here is, again, I have corporate and officer onboarding on my team for the organization that's global. I have the global leadership development pillar as well. So I'm responsible for all leader training across the globe. And then I'm also responsible for our Live Better You, which is what we call our education and credentialing platform. So Walmart right now offers our frontline workers in the US and some of our leaders that lead the frontline workers in the US, we offer them a no-cost high school or college degree from day one they come to work here. And that's for part-time and full-time as well. So just to let you know, we've got the corporate world's largest skilling ecosystem. We have over 2.4 million employees. Just last year, we announced that we're going to invest a little over $1 billion in training and development over the next 5 years. And how we're doing this is by spreading our Walmart Academy, which was just focused on the US. Now we're spreading it into a global operation. And we're also increasing investment in our Live Better You platform so that people can not only have access to a high school or college degree, but they can also have access to short form learning certificates that we've aligned to high demand areas of the business. And what short form means is within 18 months, mostly 12 months, we can take you as a frontline worker. And this goes back to the career mobility question. We can take you as a frontline worker and put you through these programs. And we've done this with cybersecurity right now. We've moved 11 frontline workers from roles in the store into cybersecurity analyst positions. We are moving some of our frontline store associates into jobs where they're truck drivers now. And the world needs a lot more truck drivers. We are really at a deficit with truck drivers. So we're identifying those critical demand areas of the business, that sort of future proofing and future planning, if you will, which a lot of it is in trades and apply what we call sort of an applied learning model to get people capable in trade skills such as HVAC repair, plumbing, truck driving, things like that. We need workers in those areas, but also in tech areas, like cybersecurity analysts, stuff like that. So we're doing these apprenticeship models, if you will, through our Live Better You program. Our Walmart Academy, we have over 209 Academy locations across the US right now. We're going to spread that globally, but we have in-person learning and on-demand digital learning there as well. We have a role-based badging and credentialing system that we've implemented across our US workforce, where you earn badges for expertise that you show, like if you're cake decorating, for example. There are 3 levels of cake decorating badges. You can earn those, and it gives us a heat map of capability across the US workforce, but it also helps us in the talent marketplace make you more visible based on your skills, and brings visibility to our internal recruiters for your skills. And then we just opened not too long ago a community academy in Chicago. So this goes to that added responsibility of how do we get into our communities, and how do we help educate and train folks who aren't necessarily working for us, but who may be able to be skilled and become capable for jobs at Walmart or jobs somewhere else, but just to really help build community and capability in the communities in which we operate. This is what our CEO calls that becoming a regenerative company, is getting into the communities that we operate in and serving the needs of the community. A lot of that in Chicago came out of the George Floyd murder. 8 of our Walmart stores in a specific area of Chicago were looted. We had to shut them down and close them for a while. And then Doug came to Chicago to announce we were going to reopen and redecorate them and modernize them. Some of the challenge that the community felt was, will Walmart reopen after having all of these stores looted? Doug went there and rededicated that, yes, we're going to open and make them better. But, oh, by the way, we're also going to invest in the community. And we built this community academy. It's in my remit right now, and we are doing a lot of HVAC training. We're doing life skills training there, and really helping to prepare people to be able to have life-sustaining jobs. So going on our Live Better You program a little deeper, this is really a skills transformation ecosystem. So we're really connecting associates to that career mobility. Store associates who didn't really think before that there was a lot of options beyond just working in the store, right? Which a lot of people like that. They want to move up into leadership in the stores, and that's fine. We can help them get there. A lot of them want to see what career growth and opportunities are available to me beyond just what I'm doing here. This is that dynamic talent pool I was talking about earlier, where you have to broaden your thinking on building capability over time. So right now, if someone comes in and wants to do a bachelor's degree program through our Live Better You, it may take them a little longer than 4 years to get that degree, to attain that degree, because they've got families or they're working full time. All these things you have to balance as you're educating yourself, as you're re-credentialing yourself. There's also those short form learning opportunities as well. So this really also helps us get to a more equitable opportunity channel, if you will, opportunity pathways for people. So again, we pay for 100% of the program tuition and books in this program for our associates. Again, we don't offer just degree programs. We do offer those short form certificates and boot camps and career diploma programs as well. We have over 50 programs that are available. And we do this through an education platform called Guild. So I'm not familiar, if you're not familiar with that, Guild Education is the platform that sits underneath the Walmart banner, if you will, and they help us connect our associates to the different education opportunities or the universities that provide the programs for folks. The interesting thing about LBU, we call it LBU, we have over 78,000 associates. It's actually kind of ticked up since I put the slide together. It's nearing 100,000 now. Associates that have access and are in the program. We started this program in 2018. We have over 12,700 graduates already. And we're starting to get some interesting data back, especially about equitability, equitable opportunity and diversity. Our Black participants are 87% more likely to receive a promotion than non-participants. So if you've gone through LBU, you're more promotable than those who haven't gone through LBU. We have a 4 times higher rate of retention in associates that participate. I mean, candidly, you have very motivated learners in this program, right? But the interesting thing is too, 17% of students who identify as Black or African American and 15% who identify as Latino or Latinx match. So 17% of them, of our participants, identify as either Black or African American or Latinx. That matches the same percentage of population in our workforce. And so we're definitely having a reach of equitable growth and opportunity, we feel, with these programs. So I want to go into just a little bit. I know I've been like yammering away. I apologize for this like dense content that I'm giving you, but there's so much going on, right? And so a question on LBU and internal program. So LBU is an internal program, but we partner with Guild Education on, and I would strongly recommend, if you want to open up a program like this, that you look at a partner to really help you, because they're connecting us to all the different universities and providers of curriculum, and makes it a lot easier for you to go to market faster. Okay, great. So I just I want to leave you with these things. I know we've had some dense content here, but I want to think about that new playbook, right? Think about these things. And in the book, I actually give you some resources that you can work through on constructing at least a new way of thinking, a new strategy you can take to your leaders. We know work is going to get exponentially more complex and more automated. There's going to be more augmentation to what we do. So getting to know how the work gets done and integrating more with workforce planning sounds like the majority of you are already on that track, which is fantastic. Redefining your value proposition. When you think about that capability crisis, how do you really want to get in front of the future workforce you need and the capabilities you need to really be looking for? And I'll tell you what, I was talking to the CLO at EY, Ernst & Young, and she's like, we're assertively focusing in leadership skills. That's really what we know we need and we have a deficit of. And so you need to just sort of think about where, for your business, where is the real impact over the next 3 to 5 years that you can really have to steer off that capability crisis. And then that capability within your organization yourself, within your learning team, your HR team. What do you all need to do, and how are you going to look at developing those capabilities as well, right? So we don't get stagnant in our practice. Then I'll just say, look, I've got some ideas here that I'll share with you, some resources here. I don't know, Jay, if we can get these URLs to folks. I've also got some handouts that Jay's going to make available to you that come directly from the book. But here you can download some playbook examples that I've got. I put together some playbooks in this role, my last role at Delta. I think that's the one I'm sharing. And then I've got a collaborative document I think could be really interesting for you to check out. So I've had this document going on since I wrote the book and was published last year. And collaborative meaning you can go in and you can add, so lots of learning folks over the last year have gone in and added their thoughts and insights into this document. And it's really about the changes needed in L&D for the digital age. So please access it and just pull it down if you want and take it, copy and paste, or add to it, because that's really the whole idea of it. And then at my website, I've got a discussion guide for my book as well. So, and then of course, please, if there's anything you want to talk about further, just ping me, just email me, and we can go. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So if you want to talk to me there, that's also welcome. I think we might have just a couple minutes for questions, Jay. I don't know.
I think we've really got 3 minutes. So
sorry about that.
That's okay. This was wonderful. With the 3 minutes, I really want to take the time to say thank you to Brandon, and I hope people will either come off mute, use the hand clap, chat, do whatever you want to thank Brandon for a wonderful presentation and great information. Brandon will look, as part of the thank you, we'll get the recording out. We'll make sure that people can access your links and the reference materials. We didn't talk about if you could share the deck or not, but that's totally up to you. If you're going to share the deck, we'll make that available as well. And Frederickson has our YouTube channel as well now, so this will be part of our YouTube channel.
Oh, cool.
And people will be able to go out and reference this again. So again, just great content, really helpful and very thought-provoking. And you'll be happy to know you didn't depress me much. Lots of challenges, though, lots of challenges. And it's good to know that people like you and people who are attending the session are already focusing on them. So
yes, it's really great. We're in the best practice, aren't we? This is the best time for our practice, and it's such a great time to be in this space. So thank you all. Love it. Love the conversation.
Thank you, Brandon, and thanks everyone for joining us and spending your morning with us. We appreciate your participation. We know people are busy, and sessions like these are important for our own development as well as the future of L&D. So thank you, everyone. Have a great morning.